Hey guys, it's Nailbiter, and before I get into this replay, I wanted to just give a quick thanks to Dauntless, who has been kind enough to not only help me out with some of the graphics on my channel, like the banner on my main channel page and the intro that you just saw, but he's also actually mentioned my channel in a few of his own videos. And I know I've had quite a few people find my channel through him, so I just wanted to thank him for the help he's given me. And if by any chance you aren't already familiar with this channel, I'll put a link in the description of this video. He does a really great job with his content and his commentaries, so definitely go check him out. Anyway, this is the replay I had with the T-54 Lightweight on Abbey. A while back I was grinding for the 200 light tank, and because I haven't posted much in the last month or so, I've got a lot of 54 Lightweight replays saved up, so I'm not sure how many of them I'll get to, but I wanted to at least post this replay to get a chance to talk about playing light tanks on maps where you don't get a lot of opportunities for doing scouting runs or for getting a lot of spotting damage, which is kind of the majority of maps in World of Tanks. There are really only a handful where you have a chance to do a lot of spotting damage, and Abbey is definitely a map that falls into the former category. It's a pretty heavy-oriented map with a lot of brawling and not a lot of opportunities for doing spotting damage or even for doing early game scouting runs. I think I've talked a bit before about playing Abbey, but basically the way I see this map is you have two main flanks along the 1-2 line and the 8 line, and then a middle area where you can kind of get some vision and potentially some shots into either one of the two flanks, but primarily it's just the 1-2 line and the 8 line is where most of the action happens. In pub games, I don't see much point in ever going 8 line, and while it can be useful to have control of the middle Abbey area, I think the 1-2 line is generally the key to winning this map, so I almost always go in that direction. Now obviously, playing a light tank in a brawling area where you're probably going to run into a lot of heavy tanks can be kind of dangerous, but what I try to do and what you'll see me do in this replay is I focus on supporting the heavy tanks in my team while trying to avoid getting shot, so I kind of play the second line, and then as soon as I get the opportunity, I try to flank and get around tanks that are isolated. This is also a pretty good matchup for me. Obviously I'm top tier, with only 3 tier 9 tanks in each team, so there really aren't a whole lot of tanks that I have to worry about in this game. There's nothing super high alpha, and the T-54 Lightweight in particular I think is a little bit better than most other light tanks at sort of playing in brawling areas, because you actually have a little bit of armor to play around with. You've got decent turret armor, and the tracks can be kind of troll on this tank as well, so it's not unusual to get a few bounces with this tank, especially from lower tier tanks. Now, one of the things that's popular for light tanks to do at the start of the game is to try to rush into that middle area up into the Abbey. So knowing that, one of the things I like to do if I'm going to the 2 line with a fast tank is I like to try to get into this position at around E2, because it gives you a chance to counter anything that tries to push them into the Abbey from the 5 line, or if there are already tanks in the Abbey peeking toward the 2 line, you can get shots into them as well. And the advantage of this spot is I can hide here in this bush, and I won't get lit unless I either take a shot or the enemy team happens to push really aggressively up the 2 line, which almost never happens at the start of the game. So I can stay here in relative safety without having to worry about anything from the 2 line. While I wait for the slower heavy tanks on my team to move up, and I can support any of my teammates who are pushing up in the Abbey. So the enemy T-49 tries to rush up into the Abbey, and I get one shot into him. Unfortunately, our Panther 2 gets taken out, but the T-49 lost a lot of HP in making that play, so I'm not too concerned about him trying to re-peek toward the 2 line to get shots. Meanwhile, the IS-6 on my team and this T-34-3 are pushing up behind me, so seeing that, and it looks like the enemy team is playing kind of far back, I'm going to move up with them to make sure that I can support them. And I'm just peeking or checking back toward the middle to see if that T-49, who I know is in the Abbey, is going to try to peek out toward the 2 line at any point. So the IS-6 is engaging the Object 252 there, and it looks like the Object 252 is kind of isolated, so I'm going to move up to see if I can get shots into him. I get shot there by an STG who is sitting in a bush that I don't think I've ever seen anybody sit in that bush before. It kind of caught me by surprise, but the STG backs off, and then I saw the Object 252 shoot, and I know he has a pretty long reload, so I decided to just push around the object and get on his side, knowing that he doesn't really have any support. So I track him in place, and instead of trying to traverse his turret toward me, he continues facing forward, which gives me 3 shots into his side. And I'm in a spot where that STG would be really exposed to my teammates if he tries to peek me, so I'm not worried about getting shot from anywhere else. So I kill the Object 252, and then I see the SCG take a shot, which gives me a chance to peek and get a free shot into him. Now, an IS gets lit on the 2 line, and since I know there's an enemy OHO somewhere on the 1 line, I really don't want to deal with him. Even though the Lightweight is a little more resistant to HE than a lot of other light tanks, I still want to avoid getting shot by a derp gun. So I decided to just move up on the 2 line with this IS-6, and there's just an IS and an IS-2 in front of us. And the IS-6 is being a little passive here. I was expecting him to just push around the corner because the chances of him getting penned by the IS or IS-2 are pretty low, but he's trying to be kind of cute here and side scrape, and I get sick of waiting, so I see the IS shoot and decide to just YOL around the corner. Unfortunately, the IS-2 tracks me, and I also get stunned by Artie, so I'm not really able to flank like I wanted to, but I put a couple of shots into the IS, and then the IS-6 finishes him off. Now, I know the IS-2 is going to be able to shoot me, so instead of trying to rush around him and take a bad shot, I make sure to track him in place and at least force him to use a repair kit. And he does repair, but then he backs off the cliff and loses like 600 HP to fall damage. And now, since we've cleared out the 2 line, it's just easy flank shots from here to clean up the rest of the tanks that the enemy has on the western side of the map. So since we've clearly won this flank, I'm just going to try to farm as much as I can out of the remaining enemy tanks here. So I put a couple shots into that T-28 and then dropped down on the side of the OHO. I was thinking someone else on my team would kill the T-28, but since he's still alive when I reload again, I decide to just take him out, and then it's easy for me to outmaneuver the OHO, and I make sure to get a tracking shot on him so that I can get a little bit of extra assist damage as well. That's actually something else that you always want to try to do when you can, is when you're dealing with heavy tanks and a light tank, go for track shots as much as you can afford to, because when utilizing camo and vision isn't really an option, the biggest advantage you have as a light tank over a heavy tank is mobility, and so you want to try to use that as much as possible to your advantage. Now, this game is pretty much finished. We've won the 2 line, and the E50 in the middle is about to get killed. We did lose the 8 line, but with such a huge tank advantage, there's really no way we should ever lose at this point. So the rest of this game is just me trying to farm as much as I can from the remaining enemies. So obviously, not every game is going to go as well as this one. My team really crushed the enemy team on the 2 line, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that all 3 of our top tiers went the 2 line, the 1-2 line, and none of the enemy top tiers went 1-2 line. The E75 played the 8 line, and both the E50 and T49 went to the middle of the map, so there really wasn't a whole lot of resistance that we met on the 2 line. But still, you kind of saw generally how I like to approach dealing with these maps where you don't really get to use camo or vision to your advantage, and you have to kind of rely on other things, mainly speed and mobility. But as I said before, what I like to try to do is to play a supporting role and only peek and take shots when the enemy is reloading, so I can avoid getting shot at and losing HP. And then I try to flank when I get the opportunity, like you saw with that Object 252, and like I tried to do with that IS and IS-2, although that play didn't exactly go how I wanted it to. I will say that because I was top tier in this game, I played quite a bit more aggressively than I might otherwise have played. Obviously, playing a tier 9 light tank in a tier 10 game, you have to be much more careful and more patient. But I do think that tier for tier, the tier 9 light tanks are probably the strongest light tanks in the game. The T-54 Lightweight in particular is really a great tank, and in these kinds of matchups where you're top tier, it can be a very effective damage dealer. And I mean, the T-49 RU 1390, and I've heard good things about the Wheezy 132 as well, but I think all of them are very capable of dealing damage in top tier matches, more so than the tier 10 light tanks are. And I haven't actually played much of the tier 8 light tanks, so I don't have as much of a sense on them. But I think tier 9 is kind of the sweet spot for light tanks, and part of that has to do with the fact that tier 9s in general just get better matchmaking than tier 8s or tier 10s. So you're going to get a lot more favorable matchups playing the tier 9 light tanks than playing any other tier of light tanks. Anyway, this replay is just about finished. I ended up deciding to flank behind the rest of the enemy tanks on the 8 line instead of just pushing straight into them. So I got a shot into that T-25 and a couple shots into this E-75. I was trying to actually track him, but I missed, so I missed out on the chance into getting some more assist damage. But anyway, there's the final kill, and now I'll show you the post-game stats. I ended up getting an ace tanker for this game. I did about 5,300 damage and got 5 kills, so a pretty solid game with the 54 Lightweight. And really I just wanted to post this replay to show that even on maps that aren't great for spotting damage, light tanks can still be effective and have a lot of impact on the game, especially as a top tier. So hopefully this video was interesting or helpful to you in some way. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys later.